How do consultants actually help clients solve their biggest and hardest problems? What is it that consultants do that's so valuable to clients given the money that they spend on consultants? And what's an example of how consultants might solve a common type of client problem? Knowing the answer to these questions is important if you're either considering working in consulting or if you've recently started a consulting job, because it will help you understand the reality of what it is that consultants do, and therefore what you might do and how you might do it. And it will also help you see why consultants are so valuable to their clients. In this video, we're going to walk through an example problem and all of the steps that a consulting team might take to solve it. The example involves a big global company which has grown over a number of decades through acquisition. Let's call this company Growth Global. It's bought so many smaller companies over the years as part of its growth strategy that it's now in a complete muddle. In theory, it's a big global company, but in practice, it's a bunch of smaller companies that have all continued to operate totally separately because they never integrated and aligned properly. Specifically, the problem here is that Growth Global's sales and marketing teams are all completely misaligned, and the way that they're each individually going to market so haphazardly is losing them business. Teams across the US are marketing and selling to customers in a completely different way to teams across Europe. And in lots of instances, marketing and sales teams in Europe are actually marketing entirely different versions of products to customers than teams in Asia. And Growth Global is so big that its customers are also global enterprises. So customers in Asia are speaking to their own colleagues in Europe and the US and getting really confused because they're all being told and sold completely different things by Growth Global's various marketing and sales teams across the world. Ultimately, lots of customers are just walking away and not buying anything, which is hurting Growth Global's business. This is a really common scenario into which big companies regularly hire consultants. Growth through acquisition can make it really hard to function efficiently as a business in the long term, and consultants are brought in to resolve the misalignment by analysing, strategizing, and proposing entirely new ways of working. But how on earth would they complete such a mammoth task, which affects so many people across Growth Global's geographically distributed offices? People who each believe that their way of doing things is the right and best way, because otherwise, why would they do it that way? Welcome back, by the way. I'm Charlie, a consulting senior manager and remote business owner, and my Consultant Explorer channel is to help you be so successful in your early years in management consulting that you're set up for total freedom to do whatever you want to in life. So let's walk through step by step how a consulting team might approach this problem. Let's imagine a consulting team has arrived and set up their project base at one of Growth Global's main offices. The project has the objective of aligning all sales and marketing teams in all of Growth Global's offices across the world, which, by the way, are in over 100 different countries, with more than one office in at least half of those countries. The first thing the consulting team is going to have to do is prioritise which of those over 100 offices should be actively engaged within the project, because it's not going to be practical to involve every single one. Typically, a decision will be made jointly with the key client contact from Growth Global about which offices are the most strategically important, usually using criteria like they earn the most revenue, or they look after the most strategic customers, or they house the greatest number of sales and marketing personnel. Once a much smaller set of offices is selected, representative stakeholders are then identified across these locations, maybe one per office. These stakeholders will engage with the consulting team during various stages of the project to provide information specific to Growth Global, which the consultants won't know themselves, and to help make or approve any key decisions. The next thing the consultants need to do is gather a deep understanding of the way things are working today across Growth Global sales and marketing teams. This is important because when they propose future ways of working, they need to be realistic. They need to not break anything important, and they need to be a genuine step forward. The best way to understand how everything works today is to draw out process flows, which map all the steps that sales and marketing people take, who takes them, and what tools they might use to help complete each step. It would be too time-consuming to do this for each and every Growth Global office, even if just narrowing down to all the strategic offices. So typically the consulting team will capture the processes followed by one or two priority offices, and then they'll map any key variations from that other strategically important offices follow. I've seen whole project room walls covered in these process flows. They can be so huge, and they're often also super complex too. Getting it right is really hard, and keeping it tidy and logical for everyone else to understand is often even harder. But what is great about these process flows is that it starts to really highlight the main areas of variation within Growth Global, and also the difference between what they're doing today versus what the consultants know to be best practice. These consultants are typically expert in best practice sales and marketing, having seen it done at so many different successful clients. So now that they have an understanding of what Growth Global is doing today with these process flows, they're able to spot the improvements that can be made. Where those improvements can be made, there will be decisions that need to be made about whether to make the improvements, and if so, how. This is the next step. The consultants narrow down to a list of key recommended changes, which they propose to Growth Global for a decision on each one about whether to go ahead. Some of the recommendations will have various flavours, and a particular flavour will need to be selected. Other recommendations will involve choosing what will be stipulated for all offices versus what will be left for each individual office to do their own way. Typically, it will be the representative stakeholders that receive the recommendations and then collaborate to reach a decision for each one. Often this will be done in some sort of big decision-making forum. This bit can be really hard. Going with any of the recommendations may entail a lot of changes for any one Growth Global office, and it will always affect some offices more than others. And decisions about moving forwards with a recommendation aren't always unanimous either. Some stakeholders will agree, others won't want to. So often it comes down to a majority vote, or a priority stakeholder has to make a call. For each stakeholder, they will personally have to communicate back to their colleagues in their office that they've been part of a process that is going to impact the way that they all work. That can be really tough when it goes against what's always worked locally. They might have to face difficult questions and represent the central authority in a way that they don't necessarily feel that happy doing. But if Growth Global is going to put in place a single way of working across all of its constituent companies and offices so that it doesn't continue to confuse and lose potential customers, then lots of things are going to have to change everywhere in order to align to that single way of working. And there are always going to be parts of the business who have to change the most, or who dislike the change the most. But that's the unfortunate consequence of striving for alignment. And overall, it should mean the company is able to win more customers, because each of those customers is getting the same message from Growth Global, regardless of the part of the firm that it's talking to. Once all the decisions have been made about how things will work in the future, the consulting team can move to the next step. They can start to actually design the future way of working, capturing completely new process flows which map out all the steps that people will take, who will take them, and what tools they will use. The key thing here is that the future state processes are guided by best practice known by the consultants, but personalised by the decisions made by Growth Global and anchored where relevant on the way that things work today, so that it always stays relevant and workable, and it creates a better future for Growth Global specifically. Once the future ways of working are fully mapped out on paper, it's much easier for everyone on the project to really understand exactly what's going to happen in the future. And this means that the team can enter the final phase of the project, which is actually implementing the future ways of working. That implementation activity will likely involve the customization of technologies to enable everyone to use the same tools and in a new way. It will also involve a significant amount of training activity to ensure that all the right sales and marketing people across all of Growth Global's offices are not just aware of the changes, but that they fully understand what they personally need to do and from when. And remember that this will involve all of the people who haven't been involved as representatives in the project, which is a far greater number of people than those who have been involved. So that's a lot of upskill that needs to happen. If all of those steps can be completed successfully, then the consulting team can successfully achieve the project's objectives of creating the alignment across all global sales and marketing teams so that more customers can be landed, more revenue can be generated, and Growth Global as a business can be more successful into the future. Achieving alignment involves first understanding everything that's happening today in all of its different variations. And then it involves deciding collaboratively on how things should be done in the future. And then it involves actually making those changes. Into this process, the consulting team brings expertise and knowledge about best practice. It brings a process of prioritization and strategic decision making. It does all the legwork in documentation, presentation, recommendation, implementation to support the end-to-end approach. And ultimately, it acts as a third party that can help make headway politically with a group of representative stakeholders who ultimately always have differing views. That's how a consulting team adds value. And this approach is how consultants typically help their clients to resolve issues relating to growth through acquisition, which is such a common client problem. I hope that that's helped paint a useful picture for you about how consultants solve these types of problems. And if it has, then let me know by liking the video. And definitely subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see what I post next. If you have any remaining questions or comments, then feel free to use the comment section here and I'll do my best to answer absolutely everything. Social media links are below too if you like those. And in the meantime, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day and I wish you all the best with your exploring.